Here in Annecy, we meet a lot of friends, animation friends, and amazing animators like you, Tony Bancroft.
Ah, thank you.
And you've amazed us, and since years, and with many characters and animated creations that we're about to go through with you,
Yes.
with your hands and with your style.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and in the name of all the festival, I can say that this is your home, and you're welcome anytime you want.
Oh, thank you. And the coffee's warm.
The coffee is warm. So, can you tell us what you're drawing right now? Because I haven't asked a question, but you're already drawing.
I'm already drawing. I can't help it. I like to draw my characters, but particularly this one. This was my first opportunity at Disney to become what's called a supervising animator. That meant I was in charge of a character on a film, and it was Pumba from The Lion King, so I'm drawing Pumba. And I loved Pumba because it was a big promotion for me to get this character. I thought I would get Zazu because I had just done Iago the parrot in Aladdin. And so I thought, oh, I animated a bird. They're going to give me a bird maybe. That would be great. And then I got Pumba, the big flatulent warthog. And I felt very, very pleased, very happy because Timon and Pumbaa were already the scene stillers. They were making the movie in so many ways, even in the storyboard animatic phase. Even in the scripts, they were funny.
Yeah. Well, let's say that Simba would be much less interesting if he hadn't met those guys.
Yeah, if he didn't have buddies to share his Hakuna Matata lifestyle with.
Pretty right. So we're friend with Mark Hen, I guess?
Yes. He was my mentor, actually.
Okay.
Did you meet him last year?
Last year he was here, and it was amazing to share.
Yes.
What he had to share with us.
He is a true veteran. Mark Hen was my mentor, really kind of a father figure for many of us in the Florida Disney Animation Studio in Orlando, Florida, when it first opened. We were a very young group. It was myself, my brother, Aaron Blaze, people like that. We were all 21, 24, something like that. And Mark was the veteran, the grandfather, the father figure for all of us.
He had worked and learned with how do you call them?
The 9 Old Men.
The 9 Old Men.
9 Old Men of Disney. He was trained by Eric Larson, for those that know the 9 Old Men, who was a very kind gentleman and had animated on Pinocchio. That was like one of his first films.
Just that.
Yeah.
So, did you do research on the field in Africa with Mark, as he did, or
not in Africa? There was a select group that went early to Africa, and it was a group of people like the directors and the head of story. And
you can just drop them down.
Yeah.
It's not that we
I'm just
draw them, but
I need to use one of these, probably so I don't smear.
may I drive you to the next drawing?
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, your first animation work was about a rabbit. It was about a roller coaster rabbit.
Yeah, Roger Rabbit and Roller Coaster Rabbit. And he was so much fun because I was a brand new animator and working at Disney. I don't even know if I can still remember how to draw him. I'm going to try, though. But Roger was based on kind of a Looney Tunes character, so not very Disney at all. It was their version of kind of a Looney Tunes character. So it was very wild, broad animation. We just had so much fun working on Roger Rabbit. And like I said, we were all young. So just to be young and working on a new Disney character, and he was very new back then.
You were 20 or something?
21 when I started at Disney Florida, yeah. Yeah, very young.
So it was right after the movie, Roger Rabbit. I don't know the original name of the animated live-action show.
Yeah, so the live action one was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then they did a series of shorts with Roger Rabbit to put out in a theater. And really, they were training ground for us Disney animators that were brand new, working in Florida, and it was like our first projects. And so they gave us something that, you know, if we did a poor job, they could just not release it. It wasn't dependent on, they weren't trying to make money with the shorts. They were really all about training. And so Roger Rabbit became a training ground for us young animators.
It seems like you still know how to draw him.
I feel like it's coming together.
Is it bringing memories?
It does, yeah. I haven't drawn him in, well, probably 10 years at least. So I'm trying to remember. I think he has a bow tie. He says, please.
Is this something that all animators do? Like giving sound when they animate,
voice.
when they draw?
I mean, I do, I guess. I don't know. For me, it just makes it more fun to think about how they sound, how they talk. He has a little suspenders on. Gosh, baby Herman. So he has a funny little voice. Squeaky.
You know that the rabbit is the mascot here in Annecy.
Oh.
Every time there's a rabbit on the screen, the audience is shouting, Lapin!
Lapin!
Exactly. Let's keep on drawing rottens, if you see what I mean. Rodent, I mean, sorry. And maybe we could go to the rescuers.
Rescuers Down Under, I worked on that film, and that was where I transitioned from being an assistant animator to an animator, was on Rescuers Down Under, and I was doing a character who I cannot draw. I haven't drawn him in 30 years probably, but Frank the Frilled-Neck Lizard, it was his name. And he'd go, wood, all I gotta do is get the wood. And he had this high-pitched voice. I loved his voice. And that was my first animation in a Disney film. So on Who Framed or the Roger Rabbit short, I just did cleanup. So I was an assistant and did cleanup. But on Frank the Frilled-Neck Lizard on Rescuers Dinner, I got promoted to do some assistant animation and had a couple scenes in the film.
So which character would you lead us to now?
Then came my opportunity to become a full-fledged animator on one of the Disney films, and it was Beauty and the Beast. So when I started working on Beauty and the Beast, there was two brand new directors, Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, and they came from storyboards. They had never directed a film before, and they started working with Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, and we'd never done a musical before at Disney, so all of us animators were like, I don't know, a musical, how's this gonna work? Is it, you know, just, that's not cool, we don't wanna do a musical. Until we heard the song. And the first song that went into production on Beauty and the Beast was Be Our Guest, very French, right? Be our guest, put your service to the test. Like they can. So that Be Our Guest moment where Belle is in the castle and all the objects are putting on a show for her was the first animation I had on that film. And we had so much fun working on that because it was like a Busby Berkeley kind of dance thing. So we really just made it as fun and dancing and bright and colorful as possible. And my guy, Cogsworth here, he was the major domo of the castle, and he was trying to stop everybody. He didn't want to get in trouble from the beast, or you're making too much noise, you know, all that. He's trying to shut everybody down, and he ends up getting into it at the end, right as the beast comes in, and he gets in trouble. So this is Cogsworth.
Do you have those characters you animated at home, like in a 3D version on your chimney mantle? Or
Yeah, I have some maquettes at home that were given to me by Disney, and we would look at those as three-dimensional sculptures, and they helped us to be able to turn them in space. So it was very helpful. But yeah, I still have a few of those. And I have a lot of toys. I like to collect the toys that were made around that time. My kids used to love coming into my studio and playing with my toys. And I'd say, hey, watch it. Don't break it. Those are worth money.
do they draw?
No, none of my daughters do. I have 3 girls. Yeah, none of them really took on drawing very much. But they did like to watch Daddy draw.
We do too.
Be a guest, be a guest. Put your service to the test. Yeah, I used to love listening to those songs. Even before they came out, we would get the early versions of them, and they were just scratched. They weren't even totally, the final version or something. But we knew they were something special. They were just so catchy and so perfect for the movie. But like I said, it was the first time we had done a musical like that since maybe Oliver and Company, and I don't even know if you'd call that one a musical. But with Howard Ashman and Alan Menken writing the songs, it was just genius.
And it brings a great structure to the storytelling too.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know this, but Beauty and the Beast was up for an original Academy Award for Best Picture. Not just animated, this was before the animated Best Picture. It was up against Silence of the Lambs.
No.
Do you know Silence of the Lambs?
Yes, I do. And it's a bit more scary.
Yeah, it's totally different, right? Yeah, the Academy was not happy when a cartoon, a lowly cartoon, was up for Best Picture. And during that Oscars, I remember there was actors that would say, I can't believe that there's a movie with no actors that is up for Best Picture. How can they have a picture without any actors? And it just was a slam to all of us animators. They didn't consider us actors, but then also there's voice talent that actually lend their voice to it, so they didn't consider that acting either.
And maybe that's a transition, but actors are just parrots comparing to animators.
Yeah.
You guys are creating something out of scratch.
I always think of it as equal, though. I think Cogsworth is 50% his voice, 50% our animation. I like to think, because we do the physical acting, the pantomime acting, and the voice really lends a lot of emotion to it. So I don't know. I've always felt like it should be considered equal, even though what we did took a lot more time.
Well, I just said actors are parrots to drive us to maybe the next drawing.
Speaking of parrots, after Beauty and the Beast, I went on to Aladdin. And Aladdin brought with it an exciting time because Beauty and the Beast was up for an Academy Award. It got a lot of press. People were really starting to talk about Disney animation. The next one, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken were again doing the music for it. And it had a romance angle to it too, that was maybe a little bit easier to understand for the audience than Beauty and the Beast, because obviously he's a beast at first. So it took a while before you can really see a romance between this beast character and Belle. But with Aladdin, there was Jasmine and Aladdin, and just right from the start, they were a great couple, which you see when they're on the carpet and they're flying around a whole new world, all that. And I did a comedy character again. So now I'm feeling typecast, but in a good way. Sorry, just as live action actors are cast by directors based on their skill sets for a certain role, animators at that time were cast by the animation directors based on what they were good at. Some animators like Mark Henn were good with women characters. We used to call Mark Henn the girly man because he did all the princess characters. Some were good with villains. For me, it was always the comedy characters that I was attracted to and got cast on, which I was happy about because there's nothing like going to a screening when the movie comes out and the lights go down and people are watching your movie and all of a sudden your scene comes up and it makes people laugh and you hear it and you feel that energy that comes from what you did made people laugh. And so like a comedian, I've always loved to make people laugh through my animation. So Iago gave me a great opportunity with the voice of Gilbert Gottfried. May he rest in peace. He was this little wisecracker, and he talked like this, really grovelly. Jafar, if I gotta shove down one more of those crackers, bam, whack.
I can remember a precise scene of Iago struggling back on the shoulder of Jafar and asking, how did it go?
So how did it go? I animated that.
I know, but this very particular animation is like printed in our minds because the way he struggled back up and then put his two hands behind the chin, right?
Yeah.
Like everything's fine, and
he goes like, so how did it go? Right? So he comes in, and that comedy works, and I've done a lot of studying on comedy, but comedy is best in animation when it's contrasted right up to each other, and the flip happens very quick, right? So the bird comes in, and he was shoved in a door, and he's flying up, and he's losing feathers, and he's coughing, and he flops down on the shoulder, and then he immediately goes into, so how did it go? And that's what got the laugh, because it was contrasted dynamically right there. It wasn't like that in the original storyboards. I went to the directors and asked if we could change the dialogue in the cut so that his coughing and gasping was closer to, so how did it go? So that it had the utmost of contrast, and it happened like that. And it didn't get a laugh for a long time in the story reel, but once we did that and we changed the cut, it got a laugh. So I was very pleased that turned out well.
It's a beautiful reveal or secret. I don't know that the science of animation can drive the script to something more precise, more accurate for the audience.
Yes, and comedy, as we know, is all about timing. So just even taking out a couple frames here and adding a couple frames here can make the difference between laughing and not laughing. So after that guy, Iago, there was a change in the studio. Times were changing. Jeffrey Katzenberg was in charge of the studio at Disney, and he would say, this is my impression of Jeffrey Katzenberg, he'd say, guys, if we can make this much money with one film, we can make twice as much with two films. He was a genius, right? And he said, let's split things up. There's Pocahontas, all the A-list animators, Glenn Keane and everybody went on to Pocahontas, and all of us newbies that were still coming up and young went on to The Lion King, this new film that the studio did not believe in. It was the B film. Pocahontas was the A film. And so the lesser people, not as skilled, not as experienced, worked on Lion King.
The King of the Jungle at first.
That king, called the King of the Jungle, right? And there was two characters in the animatic, because now I'm considered a comedy guy, and so I'm looking at the cast of characters going, I wonder which one I'm going to get. It's up to the directors. They have to cast all the animators, put them where they're going to be. And I thought, well, I just finished doing a bird, Iago, in the last film, so maybe they'll cast me on this other bird that's in The Lion King. I think his name is Zazu. And so Zazu, the bird, was the one that I asked to do. I said, if I could supervise a character, which is a promotion for an animator, because now they're not only animating on that character, but they're the main animator. and they get to pick the best scenes, the close-ups and all that. They get to create the the model sheets and all that. So now I asked for Zazu, and they gave me instead Pumba, and I was so thrilled. It was like one of the best days of my life because I had already seen the animatic, I'd read the script. Timon and Pumbaa were the standout comedy stars. They really were. And Timon more so. So I was a little, I kind of wanted Timon. But Pumbaa turned out to be just the best character for me to work on. And really suited my skill sets, I think, for comedy. Because he's just a lovable big guy and very funny. And somebody that you take for granted. There's that great scene in The Lion King that I animated where they're all looking up at the stars and Timon and adult Simba and Timon's like, oh yeah, those things up there, those bright, they're fireflies attached to that big black screen there. And Pumbaa just kind of goes, he looks disappointed. He's like, oh, gee, I always thought they were balls of gas burning billions of miles away, right? That was one of my first scenes on the film, and it got a laugh in the animatic, so I was so nervous about screwing it up. You know, an animator can either make it better, make it funnier, or they can lose they can, by whatever they choose to do with the dialogue and expressions, they could take away from it too. So I did not want to kill something that was already doing so well. And I'm happy to say I think it did all right.
Well, I think we can ask the room, but...
You guys okay with it? Did it turn out all right? All right. Good.
And we are, as a child, one of the best scenes with Timon and Pumbaa is when Timon stops Pumbaa from saying it in front of the kids.
Yeah. Pumbaa, not in front of the kids. Oh, sorry. Yeah. That was one of those moments that was very different in a Disney film too, because they were breaking the third wall. So if you know about movie making, when a character kind of looks at the camera and says a line, it's breaking the third wall. Now they're communicating to the audience. So that was Pumbaa. He does the, oh, sorry. He's apologizing to the audience. And I love that about it. Then I didn't know if it was going to work. I think we all didn't really know if it was going to work, but that's so many things in The Lion King were kind of first-time chances and risks, including, by this point, Howard Ashman had died, the songwriter, and Alan Menken had moved on. And so we had a new team doing the music. It's still a musical, Lion King, but when they first told us that, here's the pitch from the directors, when all the animators came on to Lion King, you know, and we're the B team here, not knowing much about what this new film is going to be, and they said it's Romeo and Juliet. This is Jeffrey Katzenberg. It's Romeo and Juliet with in the Serengeti, kind of Hamlet, with songs by the Rocket Man. And it was like we were all looking at each other like, what? What is this film? How is this going to work? And then the director said, well, look to Bambi. We want really detailed walks and realistic animal anatomy. And so we did all this study, went to zoos and museums. I had a skull of a real warthog up on my wall and on my desk, and I had a stuffed carcass of a warthog in my office. And it was all so that we could really kind of get into what these characters look like in a realistic way, so we'd know how to cartoon them. So yeah, I even had a skeletal drawing of Pumbaa's bone structure at one time on one of the model sheets. Sorry, I'm smearing all over.
So it's more than just animating, it's also studying the deep structure of the animal.
Oh, we went very deep on, you've seen some of the B-roll from Lion King, and we're drawing animals. That really happened. We drew lions. They came into the studio, little cubs, big lions. We had an orangutan and a a mandrill, and just all kinds of animals. We didn't have a warthog only because the warthog tends to be actually a very vicious animal.
And you cannot tame it.
You cannot tame it. So we would go to the zoo for Timon and Pumbaa and draw them there. But yeah, that was a pivotal time in my career. Once I did Pumbaa and then Lion King, went beyond everybody's expectations. Blew up. Everybody was talking about Lion King. Everybody was seeing Lion King. And Disney was just so excited. Nobody more than Jeffrey Katzenberg. So, of course, he's like, guys, this is great. You know, we got the Lion King now. And then Pocahontas is coming out after that. And then Pocahontas didn't do as well. And it became obvious that the studio, they went behind Pocahontas when they should have been backing the Lion King more. But in a way, a lot of people feel like Jeffrey was he was trying to manipulate us to reach higher, to do better on the Lion King.
Like it was a challenge.
Yeah, so people call him a genius. I don't know if that's true.
Well, there were Mark with you. So
there were what?
There were Mark Hen.
Yeah.
In the cast, well, in the team. So it was not just newbies, it was also...
Yeah, and Andreas Deja, who did Scar, the villain, he was well known and he was one of the top animators. But for Mike Suri, who did Timon, and myself, who did Pumbaa, it was our first time. It was our first time having that opportunity to be the main animator on a character on a Disney film. And it happened to be The Lion King. So what that did for me in my career was terrific. And I couldn't have asked for it. Nobody could have expected that. But it gave me the opportunity to go on to Hunchback of Notre Dame. And for a short time, I was on there and I developed the gargoyles, again, comedy characters. And then from there, I got pulled off to co-direct Disney's Mulan. And that was the big opportunity after The Lion King that I went on to Mulan. And we did that in the Florida studio, which is where I started. So it was a really great opportunity. And I really enjoyed that. So people ask me all the time, what's your favorite film to work on? But I always say I have two, and it was Lion King and Mulan. Those are my babies.
How is it when you go from one character in which you can go deep into the tissues, the bones, everything you learn about the animal you're going to animate, to the direction or co-direction of a lot of characters, supervisors and animators? Is it frustrating or empowering?
Frustrating to go from film to film, you're saying?
No, I mean, when you have just Pumbaa and you're the Pumbaa guy,
yeah.
Is it frustrating when you go to supervising, directing all those animators who have a specific character to animate?
Not frustrating. I actually like that style of working, and unfortunately Disney doesn't do it that way anymore with their CG films. An animator will animate a whole scene. Anybody in the shot, any character, they animate all of them. I liked our system of supervising animators back in the day in the 90s because it gave you more of an opportunity to be an actor that just concentrates on one character. And therefore you felt more like an actor because you weren't trying to figure out all these characters, you're just focused on one. And if you can make that one character, do what it needs to do and really come off as a unique character, then I think that was the job.
And I guess this is also the moment you start to transmit, to give advice to young ones, younger animators.
Yeah, so I've taken on teaching largely now, although I do work still. I still animate part-time. I got the opportunity to do a bucket list kind of film. I've always wanted to animate not only Disney characters, but Looney Tunes. So I've worked on a couple Bugs Bunny films, Space Jam, A New Legacy. I did some animation. And then recently, Looney Tunes, The Day the Earth Blew Up, which came out in a small release recently. And that was a lot of fun. And I almost worked on Fixed, as a matter of fact, too. But decided not to because of the content being so adult. But that's between us. We can cut that out.
You prefer us to cut that?
Actually, I don't care.
Is there a character you would have dreamt to animate?
Yeah, when on Aladdin, I did love working on Iago the parrot, but boy, everybody loved what Robin Williams did with the genie, right? Vocally. So there was a large part of me that just, I wish I could do at least one scene of the genie.
To work with Robin?
To work with Robin Williams' voice, yeah. Well, he was he's a comedy character, and to me, the ultimate comedy character because of Robin Williams and what he did with that character. His voice, it was just hilarious. And it was obvious, even from the original takes that you would hear of him, and I would hear other animators on the Genie team, and I would hear their vocal tracks in the hallway as I'm walking past their office. And it was so funny, and it just had such a great energy, and I thought, man, just one scene, but I never got a chance to do that. Too busy with Pumba and Iago and all those other characters.
What about, if we talk about Aladdin, what about the guy or the person who animated the carpet? Because there were no voice there.
Yeah.
So would you say it was a more difficult job to animate without
Yeah, a lot of
voice?
people say that a master animator is one that doesn't need dialogue. Pantomime is the true challenge of being a good animator, bringing to life something without the crutch of dialogue. And so yeah, the animator, I think it was Randy Cartwright was the animator on the carpet. He did have a true challenge bringing just a rectangle, basically a rectangle, right, to life. And that's based on two of the 9 old men had a book out called The Illusion of Life, where all of us animators, we learned from it so much. And it was always about, there was a test in there where they would take a sack of flour. They called it the flour sack test. And they would give this to young animators, right? And so they would have this sack. And you want to animate the sack so that it has an attitude, it's alive. And so you would, the test was to make it feel like sometimes it's, gesturing or listening, like maybe these tassels are ears. These tassels down here become like feet. So if it could be sad and be sagging like this. And those could be hanging down. And that's a sad sack, right? Or it could be happy, and it could be up in the air and exuberant.
Do you think that's why Randy Cartwright, you said, would have had those pompons
Yes.
on the carpet to make it like the sack, actually?
It was based on the flour sack. Yeah, that design was 100% based on the flour sack from Ollie Johnson, one of the 9 old men. It was based on a real test that they would give young animators. And Randy was a professional animator, a veteran, so he took it and just had a lot of fun. But yeah, that's the flour sack challenge, which is all about pantomime animation.
That's amazing, because we almost can see scenes from Aladdin when the carpet is like, I don't know, jumping in victory or walking sadly. What's today's test for young animators?
I still assign this to my students at Lipscomb University where I teach. I still give them a flour sack and say, okay, make a character out of this. And I find it still works. It's still a great challenge for my students. because you're playing with a lot of the principles of animation. The flour sack it's half full, so it has basically a heavier weight down here. So how you draw it gives it that weight. It can squash, it can stretch, it has weight, all of those things that are the principles of good animation is that it can react. And
Is it allowed to blow some flour out?
well, there's no rules, right? So yeah, why not if you wanted it to? But it doesn't become very human if it tears open and flour comes out. The idea is that you're trying to anthropomorphize. That's what we did at Disney. It's a very scientific or big word, but basically any process where you try and make some inanimate object, a pen, a pencil, a jar, and you bring it to life to make it look human is called anthropomorphize, or anthropomorphizing something. And so that's what we did, like with the objects on Beauty and the Beast. We took a clock, a candle, a pot, and made them characters. It wasn't just putting expressions and popping on eyes and nose and those kind of things. It was using the whole design to try and create what felt like a human character, but it was still partially an object. And that's the flour sack too.
How was it to work on the anniversary, the big anniversary, Once Upon Studio piece of art?
That's a great question. So the short film that Disney put out just a couple years ago, Once Upon a Story, was based on the 100th anniversary of Walt Disney feature animation. So just the animation department had been around 100 years, and they wanted to do something special. So I was contacted by two of the very young directors that had this idea for the short. And it was a kind of an amazing short idea because it's Mickey walking through, so that it's like the end of the day at Walt Disney feature animation. All the employees are leaving. That's the live action part. And then as they shut the door, all the pictures on the walls, all the Disney characters come to life, right? And that's all 2D animation. And for that by this point, the Disney studios had let go of all their 2D animators. There wasn't very many. So they called back people like myself to do a scene, or Eric Goldberg or Mark Hand did many, James Baxter did a few. And the fun thing was that they had us do the characters that we originally did on some of the features we worked on in the 1990s. So I got called back to do a scene with Pumba and Timon. And coincidentally, it had Robin Williams' voice in it because it had the genie in it also. I didn't get to animate the genie still, but in the background is Pumba and Timon walking through, and I got to do that part. So that was a real honor because it felt like a return to, I mean, we even animated on paper. We didn't even do it digitally like they do now. We were like animating on paper like the Nine Old Men and like we used to in the 1990s. Because they wanted that look. They wanted that classic traditional animation look. So I really enjoyed working on that. I only had the one shot, you kind of got it, you can't blink, it goes by so fast, but to me that was a really special project. Oh, what to draw, let's see. To me, I never drew Mickey Mouse in a feature or a short film. They just weren't around when I was going through the system there at Disney. There just wasn't any of them. But there's something about, I feel like every animator tries to do Mickey and needs to kind of have their own version of Mickey. And I loved Freddie Moore, who was one of the first animators of Mickey Mouse. He was my... not my mentor, he was long gone, but he was the one that I looked up to the most as an animator. I loved how he drew in a very fluid way. And so I tried to learn how to draw his Mickey from the 1932 model sheet that he created. Oh, that looks terrible. Hold on. No.
That's
bad.
Heartbreaking for us to see that, but I guess it's part of the process.
It's part of the process. Yeah, we go through a lot of Go through a lot of paper. We've killed a lot of trees at Disney.
Yes, but you also inspired so many children to respect trees and animals and stuff that the balance
I guess.
is positive. And I'm sure trees would agree on being transformed into dreams.
Yes. That's a good way of looking at it.
If you had to be reincarnated into some of your character, which one would you choose?
Oh, it'd probably be Pumba. I think I'm the most like Pumba. You know, I just love his happy-go-lucky attitude and his positivity. No matter what, you know, how negative Timon gets, it's always Pumbaa that sets him right, puts him on the right track.
Is Mickey also a test for young animators?
Yeah, I remember my first, actually it was Goofy. I think my first test at Disney was a Goofy test, but many animators will do Mickey when they're first training at Disney because he's deceivingly simple. You think he's easy to draw, but he's not so easy to get right. His proportions and everything.
I don't know why, but it makes me think about the Muppets in the Sorcerer Apprentice,
Oh,
where there's it was a huge mess that Mickey did, but
yes.
there is so many, well, animation in those scenes.
Yes. I know what you mean, yeah.
What is he happy about?
He's got a date with Minnie. Ta-da! It's a little smudged, but there's Mickey.
Tony, it was an absolute pleasure and privilege to have this like private, I don't know how to say it, but travel through animated times with you.
I know, I love talking about the history of Disney or at least I call it the more recent history. You know, it's the second golden age is what they called the 1990s. And I started at the very beginning of the 1990s in 1989. And I finished and left Disney in 2000. So I was there not very long, but it was that sweet spot in Disney history where we were still doing 2D animation, and it went from, you know, Black Cauldron and, you know, some of these early films where it was just going down and down, and then those 1990s was the grand time where everything was great, and we didn't know how good we had it. We really didn't. It's only in retrospect sometimes in life, right, that you look back and you say, those were the good times. Yeah. It's still good, though. I still love what I do. I get to draw cartoons and for a living. Come on. I mean, who wouldn't love that? Thank you, guys. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Let's do it again next year.
That's a rendezvous, as we say in France.